Good morning. Thank you for this wonderful invitation. It's a great pleasure to be back in Berlin and to participate in the Open Science Days and discuss this very challenging topic in the next day and a half. I expect to learn a lot from these discussions. So, what is rigorous and robust science about in the current environment? First of all, what does science look like in the current environment? We have an unprecedented number of people contributing to science. We have about 50 million authors who have published at least one scientific paper. We have an unprecedented productivity, prolific productivity, about 200 million scholarly documents published. They're increasing at a rate of close to 8 million more per year. We have a rapid shift on where that work comes from. China has long overtaken every other country, including the US, in terms of number of produced papers. India will also overtake the US in 4 years to have the second position in this rat race. Another major difference, 78% of scientific literature is produced currently by countries that are not full democracies. Countries that are not full democracies include, in the last roughly 10 years, the US and several European countries. A similar percentage is published by countries without full freedom of the press. So, one going back to traditional principles of sociology of science, one wonders, can we really do science under these circumstances? So here's what has happened over the last 2 decades. We have seen a tripling of publications. We have seen a massive advent of people who publish like crazy. I consider myself a maniac. I cannot stop writing and publishing. But at some point I realized that there's about 30,000 people who publish more than I do in given years. Over-prolific authors have massively escalated. We have about 100-fold escalation in the number of retracted papers, although everybody feels that the vast majority of completely flawed and fraudulent papers are not retracted. There's a lot of resistance to correct the record from journals, editors, publishers, of course, authors, and so forth. How much is fake out there? In the past, I have always been asked, so, Dr. Ioannidis, you're talking about fraud. No, I'm not talking about fraud. There's not fraud in science. If someone wants to be fraudulent, they're not going to become a scientist. It will become whatever else, a politician, who knows. I mean, there's so many careers to become fraudulent and be successful, not a scientist. I have to say I was thinking about the past. Yes, in the past, fraud was kind of a work of art, not a Mona Lisa, but it did take effort to craft a fraudulent paper. Now it can be done in massive scale. So some estimates that I will show you suggest that maybe 10%, perhaps even 15%, mostly paper mill products and AI fake manuscripts are being submitted. Science is no longer just about scientists. It's about a whole ecosystem. If you look, for example, at the top US universities that typically have the top rankings in all sorts of institutional ranking classifications, which I think are all wrong and should be abandoned, but they're still out there. In 2005, there were 30 students, 2 faculty members, and 1 administrator. Well, now we have, in top US universities, a little bit more faculty, but 1-to-2 ratio of administrators to students. And in fact, there are some universities like Caltech, Duke, and University of California, San Diego that have more administrators than students. At Stanford, we have more administrators than undergraduate students, but if we add our graduate students, we have more students than administrators. How about spending? Who's investing in science? This has also changed. In 2005, there was a lot of public and government support. 40% of R&D in the US was from public and government sources. Now it's about 20% if there's no cuts implemented, and it would be 10% if the originally proposed cuts, like 40% cut to NIH and even more to NSF, were to be fully implemented. Now, this may not come to pass, at least for biomedical research. Asking around my colleagues in Europe and in Asia, is your funding continuously increasing or stable? All of them say, no, it's been cut. But the focus is all in the US. And in fact, eventually, paradoxically, the US may be the only high-income country where public biomedical research funding has not been cut and may even increase by a little bit less than 1% if the current plans get approved. Who has the most power nowadays has also changed. In 2005, the top 10 computational capacity institutions were all academia and research institutions. Currently, it's all industry and big tech. And then who really shapes science in the public understanding has radically changed. In 2005, there were podcasts that covered also scientific themes, usually had hundreds, maybe thousands of views. In 2025, there's a podcast, cumulatively they reach to billions of views, and many of them affect our understanding, use, implementation, and sometimes distrust of science. Other players, social media, in 2005, there was no Twitter. Now we have X and many others, and something like 200 billion tweets anticipated for 2025. And in the big question, is science currently overall more beneficial or harmful to humans? 20 years ago, everyone would say, of course, undoubtedly, yes, science is the best thing that has happened to humans. We need more science, we need more research, we need. There's lots of people who would not give this type of answer in 2025. I hope so, but I'm not sure, which is what many people will say, and many others will be kind of adamant that science is harmful. They will talk about conflicts of interest, about SARS-CoV-2 coming from a lab, lockdowns destroying everything and everyone, loss of trust, and challenge to the core Mertonian values of disinterestedness, communality, universalism, and organized skepticism. So, rigorous and robust science, hopefully, is our way out of that conundrum. But the question is, what is rigorous and what is robust enough? And if you ask different scientists across these 200,000 subdisciplines that are what this map of science that I have drawn with my colleague Kevin Boyack show, each dot is a subdiscipline, they have a different perception of what really matters to make research more rigorous and more robust. In fact, what we see, these millions and hundreds of millions of publications are only a subset of the total. If you think of the universe, we know that there's ordinary matter and ordinary energy, but there's also dark matter and dark energy, and the same thing may be happening in the universe of science. There's probably a lot of dark matter, which is all the unpublished analysis or the potential analysis or the things that don't really come to the surface to be published. We just see snapshots, usually very selectively reported and with some narrative being built around them, and also probably a lot of dark energy, all these conflicts, all these stakeholders who don't really prioritize necessarily the public good and curiosity for driving knowledge and reaching the truth, or quote-unquote the truth. How are we going to optimize our work? What are even the features of optimal research practices? Are we even sure that they should be more rigorous and more robust? I get a lot of pushback from many scientists who say, are you just trying to add another layer of bureaucracy to us? We're struggling with, are under attack, we are cornered, and you're telling us, just try to shoot yourself in the foot. Could seeking more rigor and robustness be damaging to the efficiency of science? My reply is no, we want rigor and robustness so as to improve the efficiency of science. If we don't do that, why are we doing it? Then if we know what are these practices, are they adopted? Are they adopted routinely? And can they be adopted routinely? These are open questions for each scientific field to address. For many years now, there is science reform movement that is trying to change the adoption of efficient, rigorous, beneficial, helpful research practices. This is one such manifesto we published a number of years ago. There's people from very different walks of life, very different disciplines converging that this is an important thing to do. And when we try to map who should do that, it shouldn't be just scientists, it should also include journals, publishers, funders, institutions, professional societies, lots of other stakeholders, and eventually also the wide public that cares and should care about research and science. All of us are talking about reproducibility, and this term reproducibility of result is used geometrically more frequently over time. But we don't agree on what exactly we mean by reproducibility. So 9 years ago, along with Steve Goodman and Dan Fanelli, we wrote that paper trying to put reproducibility into 3 major bins, so as to try to communicate on what exactly are we trying to do by aiming for more rigorous and more robust science. The first bin is methods. We want to be able to understand methods. This is usually fine print. We want to be able to have access to the code, to the raw data, to the materials, the experimental conditions, to be recognizable, to be able to go to another lab or to another laptop, to another computing system, and be able to resurrect that machinery. Reproducibility of results is about doing new studies that try to look at whether the original study results can be reproduced, can be replicated, can see new results that are compatible, not incompatible. There can be some tricky hues of definitional ambiguity here, and I know of at least 17 different ways to compare original results with subsequent results and say that they agree or do not agree or are compatible or they're failed or whatever. And finally, reproducibility of inferences is about what do we make out of scientific evidence, from 1 to multiple studies, occasionally from no studies. You know, most guidelines in medicine are informed by no studies. We just get experts together, and you know, a big expert, and you're a big expert, and we have no evidence, but we're big experts, so we'll tell you what to do with your life. So how do we make inferences based on availability or not availability of experts and evidence? Why are there differences across fields? We can break them down to lots of granular contributors that make scientific fields different in terms of how they practice. They differ in degree of determinism. You know, physical sciences versus biological versus social sciences, very different degree of determinism. Signal to measurement error ratio, complexity of designs and measurement tools, closeness of fit between the hypothesis and the experimental designs and data that are considered to be okay. You know, if you get the 7th digit wrong in calculating the gravitational constant, you're in deep trouble. If you get the main digit wrong in medicine, you're probably just average, you know, better than average probably. Statistical analytic methods to test the hypotheses, or whether we even use statistical methods or more qualitative, you know, biological reasoning, biological plausibility reasoning. What is the typical heterogeneity of experimental results? Is there a culture of replication, transparency, and accumulating knowledge, or people just don't want to hear about replication? They see that as Me Too type of work, not to be done, not to waste effort. What are the criteria for claiming eureka moments? If it's statistics, is it a p-value of less than 0.05? Like most of biomedical research, is it a p-value of 10 to the minus 5, you know, 5 sigma in physics? Is it 10 to the minus 9, like much of omics nowadays? Why are we doing this? What is the purpose? Is it just curiosity? Are we going to treat people? Are we going to treat communities? Are we going to affect lives and livelihoods? And finally, increasingly in our days, how much penetrance of advocacy, activism, financial conflicts, big tech agendas, political agendas, and other types of interference do we see in shaping that literature? For the last 10 years, many fields have gone into soul-searching mode and have identified that some of the creme de la creme papers that they had published cannot be replicated. There can be debate on what that means and whether the original was wrong, the subsequent research was wrong, both were correct or both were wrong for various reasons. But this is the typical picture that we get. This is the classic paper 10 years ago in Science by the Open Science Collaboration in psychology, 100 creme de la creme papers with very faithful attempts for application by committed psychologists who tried to do their best. Roughly 2 out of 3 could not be replicated, and the effect sizes were about 1/3 in the replication experiments versus the subsequent work. people are not willing to accept that very often. So we've seen that in epidemiology, in clinical research, in psychology. Even when something cannot be replicated repeatedly, like multi-lab experiments, 50 teams not being able to see ego depletion in the way that it was seen originally, people continue to cite the original paper. They continue to cite ego depletion. They continue to cite that beta-carotene is a very effective chemopreventive agent. Why do they cite that? Not to say that we were wrong, but mostly to say, well, we continue research in this area because we think it's very important. And they even silence their replication efforts, or if they do mention them, they find some reason to say, I don't believe them, and I still stick to the original narrative. Can we predict what will replicate and what will not? In some fields, perhaps, we might be able to do that to a modest extent. I would say these are fields that have some insider knowledge. For example, if you ask experts, and even better, if you have a prediction market where experts don't just give an opinion, but they put their money in a way to say, this is what's going to replicate, this is not going to replicate, and if they get it right, they make money. If they don't get it right, they lose money. They can get it a bit better than chance. But these are fields with insider knowledge, meaning that perhaps in the corridors of conferences, people may be chatting that, John Ioannidis, I just couldn't get his work to be replicated. I've wasted 3 months. Oh, yeah, I wasted a month and I gave up. John's work is horrible. Everybody knows that. Don't waste your time again. But most fields don't have this type of insider knowledge. In many fields, there's no way to have insider knowledge, especially as we go into this type of multidimensional, completely agnostic research, where we just throw measurement capacity blindly, agnostically, to try to come up with signals. I have no clue what will come up out of any omics type of shotgun approach that is dominating many fields of science. Non-replication is not something that people like to hear, especially if it's about their own work. I think I may feel okay to hear that my work does not replicate because I've made a career saying that work does not replicate. So that would probably be supportive of my main theory. But most people don't like that, and that leads to very emotional responses very often, what I call reproducibility wars. And it's very human, I think. But the bottom line is how easy it is to really do replication work. And the truth is that it is not easy at all. We have the experience, for example, from the reproducibility project Cancer Biology, where people tried to look at 193 experiments, highly cited in top journals, asking the original investigators, what did you do? Please explain, tell me, let's go back and try to do it again. Most of them could not even get started. The main problem was not that 2 out of 3 that did get started did not get results compatible with the original experiment. The main problem for me is that about 75% could not even get started, even trying to reach out to the investigators and ask them, what exactly did you do? So out of the 193, only 50 could be done. The other 143 just didn't go anywhere. We got no results. We could not get any results. And the second worrisome component is that even when these 50 were completed, it took on average 197 weeks for the duration from starting until getting it published. And it's not that they were delayed in publication. eLife, which is a prestigious journal, had agreed that I have already looked at your protocols and I know that you're doing this, so I will just publish that. Very, very short peer review. It's waiting for you to get published. So 4 years for a highly cited experiment published in a major journal. You can think of the average PhD student starting on their PhD, going to the lab, the supervisor says, let's find something to get your hands wet and get you started. In the next couple of days, try to repeat that experiment that was recently published in Nature. And then they need 197 weeks to repeat that experiment, and 3 out of 4 times not even being able to get it started. I think it's a very, very frustrating experience. And we see that not only in wet lab research, we see it in silico research. For example, in an early paper that we did in collaboration with Nature Genetics, that was a pioneer in sharing data, for example, for microarray array studies. we got 18 papers, and we got top microarray experts, and we told them, okay, these papers were published in Nature Genetics with the precondition to publication that everything will be shared for anyone who asks. Raw data, code, protocols, whatever. It just couldn't get done. 2 out of 18 of these papers could be reanalyzed and reproduced faithfully as in the original publication. In the other cases, there were discrepancies or could not be done at all. And the reason that it would not be done is that even though it had been promised, the data sets were not available, the software was homemade and it had disappeared, the methods were not clear at all, or everything was clear, but the reanalysis got different results. And one might say that's okay, but this is very early stage research, we have some growing pains, but this type of lack of trust in the raw data themselves is harmful when it comes to clinical research. For example, Study 329 was a clinical trial published in 2001 by SmithKline Beecham, which is currently GSK. It found that imipramine and paroxetine are both very effective and not harmful in children and adolescents with major depression. 15 years later, independent investigators get hold of the raw data, they reanalyze the trial, and they conclude that both of these antidepressants are harmful and not effective in adolescents. And in the meanwhile, we had experience of adolescents' suicides and suicidal ideation and black box warnings that people were wondering what is going on. The trial had suggested that these are effective and safe treatments. How much of the old literature, these 200 million papers, can we unearth now? Because this is our legacy. This is what we build our current science upon. Unfortunately, very little. Along with Tom Hardwick, for a number of years now, we have launched what we call the Data Ark project, like Noah's Ark. We go to the investigators of the 100 most cited papers in each scientific discipline, and we say, you've done amazing work. We want to maintain and sustain your legacy. Please send us your data sets. We will curate them, prepare them to be used in a way that would be very friendly for everyone. We want no money for that. We'll do it for free, and that will perpetuate the legacy of this important work. Very few people do that. Some have already shared. A few more are willing to share with us, and then we post the data sets. The vast majority do not, and the reason is not that they are bad people and they do not want to share. The most common reason that they give is that they do not have these data sets. The data sets are outside of the control of the principal investigator, which, for example, it might mean that the principal investigator never saw the data sets that carry their name as first author or corresponding author. Perhaps the data sets were collected by a company, and then a statistician from the company analyzed that evidence and then sent the analysis and the manuscript. Hopefully the PI did look at the manuscript before they put their name on it. I'm not sure, but hopefully. And therefore, they never had control of these data sets. Some other fields have agreed that sharing should be the norm. So, for example, public genomic data, we published that paper in Science about 6 years ago. Everybody in that list, we have 71 authors, agreed that if something is publicly funded in omics, we need to make it available. Not even wait for the data generator to publish their little snippet of a little piece of data set with their own name. They will get credit for whatever gets published in the total coalition, the total consortium, the total accumulation of knowledge from all the data being produced. At the same time, we have a lot of push in the entirely opposite direction. So small data sets are a problem because most studies are small in sample size. Big data sets are also a problem recently in the last 10 years because we have huge electronic health records and omics and so many other data sets that people can probe. But increasingly, we have the problem of having no data at all, and actually no data being proposed as the norm and as the lionizing approach to science. About 10 years ago, I wrote the first negative piece against Theranos that at that time had the highest valuation than any startup at $9 billion. Their CEO was front page in all magazines and newspapers, getting honorary doctorates, being at the board of Harvard Medical School, visited by the vice president. The the beacon of hope for innovation and disrupting healthcare. Now she's in jail. So what I wrote 10 years ago was that I don't know if the valuation should be $9 billion or $9, because I just see no evidence. I see that they publish nothing. They were very proud of not publishing anything. They said, we do stealth research. We will disrupt everything and people will not even notice. We will bombard the entire health system and science, and our stealth bombers will run away carrying the spoils. It was all fake. Well, is that just a bad single apple? Many people want to see it this way, but when we looked across all startups, companies in health and healthcare, about half of them have the same signature of practically stealth research. They don't publish anything or very little about all the big claims that they make that give them valuations above $1 billion. They're all unicorns that we analyzed in this analysis. And the new wave of innovation with AI and large language models, even pushing that frontier further. I've heard, for example, that Stanford has the highest computational capacity than any other university worldwide. I want to feel proud about it, but I realize that within a few miles in that same Silicon Valley, we have many other big tech companies that have 100 times, if not 1,000 times, more computational capacity than we do. So Alphabet, Meta, Microsoft, and Apple have far, far more computational capacity than any university. This means that most research in this new era may grow outside the published scientific literature. The published scientific literature may be for losers like me. Oh, John is publishing lots of papers, like little toys. That's not really essential. The real stuff is happening at our headquarters, like, a few blocks from my home in Menlo Park is Meta. I should try to invade that space if I really want to do science, but let John play, let you play with their little academic toys. Much of that may not even be open source. Some of that may be open source, but this doesn't guarantee that it will not become closed at some point. And if it becomes closed with LLMs, it means that it has absorbed everything that anyone else has contributed in the process. New practices include venues to try to accommodate that vast proliferation and acceleration of productivity. We have mega journals that publish more than 2,000 articles per year. Some of them publish more than 20,000 articles per year. Modest acceptance rates. They claim to be rapidly peer reviewing. Not really sure about that. They get money for what they publish. They have thousands of special issues that they accumulate, papers to build CVs to get people promoted. I don't want to dismiss that because I'm not against publication. I think publication is better than non-publication. Non-publication means publication bias. It means selective reporting. It means a very distorted view of what we have learned or what we're trying to learn. But I think it's an issue of incentives and what is it that we care. We have seen, as I said, a very rapid proliferation of extreme publishing behavior. We have seen what I call precautious citation impact that probably very often reflects citation cartels. And it's not just a couple of people coordinating to cite each other, but sometimes it could be hundreds of people in a big network that create these citation cartels and can propel someone to the top of productivity, and even citations within just a few years. And of course, predatory journals, not talking about 25, 50, 60% acceptance rates, but 100% acceptance rates, journals that will just accept anything. Most of that would be very poor work, but some even good papers might go into predatory journals because people cannot realize there's no perfect definition or standard that we know, well, this is a predatory journal, and people will probably go into legal trouble if we said, yes, I have a stamp that this is predatory. But we do see that the vast majority of papers that are retracted in the last few years are just fake papers. They're paper mill products, papers that companies say, I have a paper for sale. You want to be first author, third author, value is different, price is different, how much do you want to spend? And I think we just get only the top of that iceberg, because when publishers have now started looking at how many fake papers, AI product papers, are submitted to them, this is the experience from Wiley, other publishers have similar experiences, I believe, 1 out of 7 submissions to hundreds of their journals are flagged by a new paper mill tool. If we have 8 million papers every year, and if my late mentor, Drummond Rennie, is right that if you submit a paper, it may be rejected immediately, but it will be published at some point, then this means we may have more than 1 million fake papers flooding the literature currently, and this number may just increase. So how much can we improve our 3 pillars of reproducibility? I think methods we should be able to improve. And I think that we have seen improvements in many fields that realize that this is essential. If you go back even a few years, you will see far less transparency, far less rigor. You'll see now far more initiatives that try to fix methods reproducibility. Unfortunately, I don't think that this is necessarily in those fields that produce many papers. Those that are the big producers are not really so much interested in this, perhaps because they just want to continue publishing lots of junk. Reproducibility of results remains unknown in many or most fields, and most papers where replication is not attempted. Many fields still think that replication is me too, I shouldn't do it, it's not necessary. And reproducibility of inferences, I will just put that aside for now, because I think it's okay for people to disagree. If we have transparency and we know what people are talking about, it's okay for people to say, oh, I think that this means that we should use this intervention. No, I don't think that we should use it. I think that this is a strong signal. No, I think it's a modest signal. People may be right or wrong. If we compare against the evidence, we can see that this is more likely to be correct, this is less likely to be correct. I don't want to force unanimous consensus on things that are evolving. This is the nature of science, after all. There's many, many ways that we can improve on all 3 fronts. This is a paper that I published with Tamarine de Haven from the Netherlands a couple of weeks ago. It's an overview of all the interventions that have been tried and have some hope of success. Design and conduct, including pre-registration, register reports, systematic reviews and other evidence synthesis, electronic lab notebooks, critical incident reporting, multi-team and multi-center studies, and reproducibility training. Reporting improvements like reporting guidelines, open and fair data, open access, open code, open methods and protocols, and reviewing support, including training, statistical reviewing, open peer review, and post-publication peer review. They have worked in some fields, or so we believe. Most of those do not have experimental evidence in terms of randomized trials where we compared strategies or practices, but they may have some experimental in some cases and some other evidence that suggests that perhaps in some settings, if not across the board, they may be helpful. I'll go over a few of them that are the most prominently discussed in open science. First one is registration. Just telling the rest of the world, what am I going to do? Registering a protocol ahead of doing the research. We see that this is widely adopted in some domains of research, in particular randomized clinical trials. No major journal is likely to publish a trial unless it is registered. Also in some systematic reviews, we have Prospero and other registries that register systematic reviews, not so much in other types of research. And it has become successful because publishers, journals, funders, institutions really supported the initiative. It was kind of multiple stakeholders asking for it. But we see that it can also be misused. For example, now a trial may not be pre-registered and it goes to a journal and I want to publish it, but it's not registered. Can you register it now? So the trial is registered 5 years after it was started, 3 years after it was finished. I'm not sure what kind of registration we're talking about here. For observational studies, there's some more being registered, but I think most of them are kind of retroactive registrations, and to be honest, I'm not sure that they can really be registered. If you have a data set that is available, everyone can see, how do I know that someone just did not plug into their computer and started playing with the data and then registered some analysis that seems to be nice looking? The most rigorous of all is register reports. You don't just register a protocol, which may leave a lot of room about how exactly are you going to do it, how exactly is the analysis going to be run, but you register practically the full paper without the numbers. And it gets reviewed as such, it gets provisionally accepted, and then you do the work, you populate the data in the tables and figures of the paper, get short review to make sure that you didn't deviate, or if you deviated, you can justify why you deviated, and then it gets published. Interesting, but how many papers have register reports? Far less than 1% at the moment, and to be honest, I haven't yet been convinced that these register reports will be published, and if they get published, that they will follow really the protocol that they promised in the beginning. So when we did some preliminary work, that didn't seem to be the case, but I'm very open to see some more encouraging signals down the road. And of course, there's evidence that registration is a good thing in various scientific fields. For example, this is a very nice paper by some of the top stars of the science reform movement. High replicability of newly discovered social behavioral findings is achievable. In their hands, close to 100% of the studies that they tried to reproduce were reproduced, and the reason for that was that they were registered. One minor caveat: the paper had to be retracted because actually it was not registered. So what they said that they did was not really what they promised to do. It is being reanalyzed according to what they promised that they had done, and I wait to see how that would look, but it was not really trying to look at that hypothesis. Incidentally, it happened to fall upon that observation, which was interesting, but was not the main primary hypothesis. Evidence synthesis has also helped over the years, and I'm very happy to see the rapid growth of systematic reviews and meta-analysis across science. But at the same time, the price of success is that we have been polluted with tens of thousands of very unreliable systematic reviews and meta-analysis. When we look at what is being published, I estimate that only about 3% of published meta-analysis currently are both decent and useful. There's some more that are decent but not useful, kind of irrelevant questions, and many others that are redundant, unnecessary, misleading, flawed beyond repair, and so forth. We still have tools to try to improve our overviews of the evidence. There's many such tools being launched, and I think some of them may be helpful. How do we train people? How do we make people to stick to them? How do we get the most out of them is still an open question. Better statistics. Can we make everyone a methodologist? Can we make everyone a statistician? No. But I think that improving our literacy and numeracy could be a good thing. We need better study designs. Very often studies have suboptimal study designs. Some standard features like randomization or blinding of investigators are routine. They would cost nothing for designs like animal experiments, but not followed still much of the time. We have zillions of checklists. I have published many myself. I have to question whether we have made a difference. We want to make a difference and make it easy for people to just, here's a checklist of what you need to think about and what you need to do. I'm not sure that there's shortcuts to training and to rigor. And as we get more complex, we need more complex guidance. For example, with more complex computational methods, we need more complex guidance, and this can be achieved, for example, even in the most complex artificial intelligence type of work. In that paper in Nature a few years ago, we said there's a lot of resources that people can put into play and make that very complex research completely transparent and hopefully reproducible. As I said, there's lots of reporting efforts. You can look at the Equator website. We have 6 centers around the world. I run the US Equator Center, and we have hundreds of guidelines and reporting tools, design tools. Do we make a difference? Maybe yes, but again, I would like to see more rigorous evidence. There are some studies that suggest, for example, that adoption of the concert statement did improve reporting of clinical trials, but most of the evidence is kind of pre-post or journals that did versus those that did not adopt concert, and of course, these can be heavily confounded comparisons. Journals can push for more rigor and for more robustness. For example, BMJ and PLOS Medicine for a number of years now say that we want to make everything available for everyone. If you publish a paper with us, a clinical trial in particular, you need to share everything. We went and asked, can you share the data with us? 46% did share. We ran the analysis, got exactly the same results. And we see improvements in sharing to some extent across the board. Sharing has increased from 0% to about 20% over the last 20 years. Code sharing has gone to 6%. Registration has gone to 7%. More people are willing to do registrations. If you ask for all of that, sharing, code, data, and registration, this is still less than 1%, and very few fields in science do that. So we will see probably more and more open science. It's wonderful to see that there's so much interest in this type of initiatives. We will hopefully see more randomized trials. For example, we'll see randomized like this one that shows, or these ones, that show that statistical reviewing can improve the quality of work. We will hopefully see more post-publication review, which is currently underused. When we looked at the top journals across science, we saw that very few of them have options for people to correct the record and to allow commenting and criticism to try to correct the record. And we will hopefully see evidence on how openness, transparency, and rigor can affect our funding systems, which may be fine, but we don't know because they were just entrenched and built many years ago, and no one really tested them, and they cost a lot of effort and resources to run them. At the end of the day, I will leave you with a quest for transparency also and rigor on how we reward people. We can reward them for productivity. We can reward them, though, for other things like quality, reproducibility, sharing, and translation. And this may be more important than just plugging more papers. Last slide. The discussion on how to improve science and research practice and to make them more rigorous and more robust has been very intense. Commentators are not always well-intentioned and selfless. I hope I am, but who knows, maybe I'm not. Financial and political interference are particularly worrisome. There may be even a ceiling on how reproducible and useful research can be. Perfection is unattainable, but improvements are hopefully possible. And finally, reproducibility, rigor, and robustness indicators are just surrogates. What matters in research science and its positive impact is more complex. It is to be revealed every day in that wonderful effort, but still human effort that we call science. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this very interesting keynote speak. We do have time for a few questions. I want to encourage those online to use the Q&A tool. Maybe my colleague can send the link again in the live chat. No? Okay. But you find it in the description. I think we are a little bit delayed online, so let's start with questions here in the room. Yes. Do we have a microphone? In the middle. Oh, we had. Oh, okay. We're here.
Repa Schumann said we made very nice talk, very interesting, really very complex. I like your relationship between reproducibility and transparency. Reproducibility goes to science, and transparency is the authors or the, let's say, study designers who deliver this. Now I have a little bit of a tricky question. Can we disguise all the paper mills because they're not transparent? Because they don't deliver all the data? Is this the route to go?
Well, I think that we need to consider what is the balance between incentives and penalties. And I think if we start penalizing people for not producing perfect reproducible research and perfect transparency, then probably almost everyone would have to be penalized. And in a climate where science is being attacked, I don't think that this may be the best way to go. We need accountability. I think we need to build accountability, but we need to have clear rules of what are the expectations, what we want to see, and also make a case that these are expectations not just because we want to corner people, but we want to make sure that this work is really efficient and it is delivering what it should deliver, and it is helping researchers to achieve what they struggle so hard. So I don't see transparency and all of these efforts as penalizing approaches. I see them as facilitators of better science and better success rates.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Johannes Fritsch from German National Academy of Sciences office. That was a very interesting talk, but maybe coming back to the theme of the conference, geopolitical polarization, which is basically the struggle between democracies and autocracies, as I understand it. Could you maybe comment in light of what you showed, this shift towards non-democratic countries, why is there still such a flourishing output in China, for example, of science, and how about this false data, which, as far as I know, is reduced fairly to the same level of European or American publications?
So I think that this is an evolving phenomenon, and we need to watch very carefully at what is happening. I have no problem to accept research from China, even though has a totalitarian regime in the background, if it's reproducible, if it is transparent, if it's well done, if it contributes to scientific progress. But I think it should be kept in the back of our minds, what science can be done, and what is the ceiling if we have such a background. For example, can we ask any type of question that we want in a setting that may be authoritarian, and it could be in any country. I mean, we may have authoritarian tendencies even in Western democracies currently in some ways. How do we safeguard science and the independence of science and the ability to ask important questions, to set the research agenda in ways that the scientists and the public, a well-informed public, feel that they're important and appropriate? I think these are open questions, and I think they're questions that we need to revisit every day, because there's new challenges every day on what exactly that means. I would, of course, wish that everywhere we could have perfect science, but that's not happening. And the fact that we have reversed the ratio of science from democratic countries versus non, I think it's worrisome, to say the least. It may be that the science being produced is very nice there. I have lots of asterisks to that. We have, for example, indications for paper mills flourishing in many of these countries. We have indicators of fake AI work. We have indicators of suppression of research agenda or of viewpoints. We saw that in the pandemic, for example, some people being persecuted for saying that there is a pandemic, early on. But I want to leave those aside, not be judgmental, and say, okay, can we help everyone, because this is a global enterprise. Science is a human global enterprise.
Okay, thank you. We have another question up here.
Hi, Daniel Nüst at Dresden University of Technology. I like it that you phrase here that perfection is unattainable. I think often the goal to be perfect stops researchers from doing something, right? The idealism is often there and the motivation is there, but they don't know how they can do that. But what do you think is really the lowest bar? Like, how low can we go in terms of reproducibility? What should be attempted for every paper that undergoes peer review?
I think the low bar is different in different fields. For example, there may be fields that need to have a very intensive search and a very big component of their work being exploration. Very quick and dirty exploration. And I don't think that it would be wise to just try to replicate and be thoroughly transparent and, for every little piece of exploration that is being done. If we have systems that can kind of automatically capture what is happening and just keep the notes of what has been done, but without extra spending of resources and effort for this type of field, I think that would be nice. Otherwise, we can say, goodness, this emerged out of searching in the jungle. I was in the jungle and I came across a pink panther. I don't know how it happened. I was searching for hours and days and months, and I saw that. Can you replicate? Can you find a pink panther? And if yes, then we can take that to the next level. In other fields, we should be more careful. For example, fields that have immediate impact on humans, like clinical trials. I don't think that we can afford not being rigorous. We cannot say, oh, okay, I will allow you far higher chance of dying because I made a wrong choice here. So late stage research, I think we have to be more rigorous, more demanding. Early exploration, I would even say, let people just try their best and use these tools in meaningful ways if they feel they optimize their chances of getting to something. And then we'll see if that something survives further testing.
Yes, we have another question here in the front.
Hi, Maria Bellantone from URAC Research in Italy. My question is, if I may, a dispatch from the United States, if you can give it to us. In light of the political interference and sometimes attacks on science, do you see that what you're working on and all the reproducibility and transparency efforts in science are in any way affected or under threat currently?
I think that science is under threat globally. not just in the United States. I think, obviously, the United States has always had the lion's share of innovation and highly cited papers. I published an analysis recently showing that U.S. remains the top producers of the most highly cited papers, and NIH still is heavily involved in this. The attacks on science are global, and I think it would be a misnomer to think that, well, something is going wrong in one country. I get signals from all over the world that the independence of science is threatened with various ways and with various subversive efforts, but we have to protect it at a global level. And this is not going to be easy. I think I do worry that scientists are increasingly pushed to take political positions. Like, we are attacked from the right, so I need to become left-wing to show that I support science. Or I'm attacked from the left, I need to become right-wing to show that I want to support science. This is a very dangerous game because, scientists were not trained to be politicians. Once we go into that, we will very quickly be trashed. These politicians are far more experienced in politics than scientists, I believe. And I worry that we sometimes adjust our response based on who is making a proclamation. Like in the US, there was the executive announcement about rigorous science, good quality science. Maybe people attacked it because it came from a given political person, the President of the United States. But if you look at what is described there, if you see reproducible science, will I attack reproducible science if it's by a person that one may not be aligned politically with? I think that would be wrong. If someone says, I want better quality, more transparency, more replication, more reproducibility, I don't care who says that. And I want to detach that from being a political claim. I want to keep that as something that all scientists can unite and say that this is something that we all want. We want better science. We want more rigorous science. We want also independent science.
Independent wasn't there.
Independent was not there. Well, some language was there close to that. But at any rate, I think that we should disengage science from who is making claims, especially if it's politicians. Let the politicians in their world, let's try to safeguard science and its independence, of course.
Thank you very much. I think we did not have any comments from the online audience so far, and we are just on time, so thank you one more time for the great keynote.